Step right up, folks, because today we're diving into the roaring, bullet-riddled history of the man who turned crime into an empire. We're talking about none other than Alphonse Gabriel Capone, better known as Al Scarface Capone, the undisputed king of Chicago's underworld. Born in Brooklyn in 1899 to Italian immigrants, young Al wasn't exactly destined for a quiet life. He was a bright kid, but a rough neighborhood and a quick temperament school wasn't for him. After punching a teacher in the face at age 14, he dropped out and fell in with street gangs, like the 5 Points gang. This is where he met his mentor, the infamous Johnny Torrio. It was also during this time he got those famous scars that gave him his nickname, Scarface, a name he absolutely loathed. He'd claim they were war wounds, but the truth is, they came from a bar fight over a woman. In 1919, Johnny Torrio saw a golden opportunity brewing in Chicago. Prohibition was on the horizon, the nationwide ban on alcohol. Torrio knew that where there's a ban, there's a buck to be made. He invited Capone to join him, leaving the small-time rackets of New York for the big leagues. Capone started as a bouncer in one of Torrio's brothels, but his sharp mind and ruthless ambition quickly saw him rise through the ranks. When Torrio decided to retire after a near-fatal assassination attempt in 1925, he handed the keys to the kingdom to his 26-year-old protege. Al Capone was now the boss of the Chicago outfit, and boy, did he run with it. Capone wasn't just a thug. He was a criminal mastermind, an organizational genius. He transformed the outfit into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. We're talking bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, protection rackets. You name it, Capone's organization had its fingers in it. He centralized control, streamlined operations, and used brutal violence to eliminate any and all competition. His network of illegal breweries and distilleries supplied the entire Midwest with booze, delivered by fleets of trucks and protected by men armed with Thompson submachine guns, the infamous Tommy guns. The profits were staggering. At its peak, Capone's empire was estimated to be pulling in over $100 million a year. That's billions in today's money. But Capone was a man of contradictions. On one hand, he was a ruthless gangster responsible for countless deaths. His war with rival gangs, particularly the North Side gang led by Bugs Moran, turned the streets of Chicago into a war. The climax of this conflict was the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. 7 members of Moran's gang were lined up against a garage wall and gunned down by men disguised as police officers. Capone was conveniently in Florida at the time, giving him a perfect alibi, but everyone knew who was behind it. The public was horrified. This was no longer just a spat between criminals. It was a cold-blooded slaughter. On the other hand, Capone cultivated a Robin Hood-like public image. He was a celebrity, always dressed to the nines in sharp suits, waving to crowds, and giving interviews to reporters. During the Great Depression, he opened soup kitchens that fed thousands of unemployed Chicagoans every day. He handed out cash to the needy and was seen by some as a man of the people, providing a service alcohol that the public desperately wanted. He famously said, "I am just a businessman, giving the people what they want." This duality made him a fascinating and complex figure. He was both feared and, in some circles, adored. The law, however, saw him differently. Federal agent Eliot Ness and his team of incorruptible agents, nicknamed the Untouchables, were tasked with taking Capone down. They relentlessly raided his breweries and supply lines, costing him millions. But Capone was slippery. He had judges, politicians, and police officers in his pocket. Witness intimidation was standard practice, so getting a criminal conviction to stick was nearly impossible. They couldn't get him for murder. They couldn't get him for bootlegging. So the government changed tactics. If they couldn't get him for the obvious crimes, they'd get him for something else entirely. Enter the IRS. Federal prosecutors decided to go after Capone for tax evasion. It was a brilliant move. While he was swimming in cash, he never filed a tax return, claiming he had no legal income. The feds meticulously built a case, tracking his lavish spending and proving he had a massive income that he was hiding from Uncle Sam. In 1931, the trial began. Capone, ever a showman, was confident he could bribe or intimidate the jury. But in a last-minute switch, The judge swapped the jury pool with one from another trial. Capone's fate was sealed. He was found guilty on several counts of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, one of the longest sentences ever handed down for the crime at the time. His journey through the prison system began at the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta. At first, he managed to maintain his influence, bribing guards and living a life of relative luxury behind bars. But the authorities were determined to break him. In 1934, he was transferred to the newly opened maximum security federal prison on Alcatraz Island. Alcatraz was a different world. It was designed to be escape-proof and to crush the spirit of the nation's most notorious criminals. Here, Capone was no longer a kingpin. He was just inmate number 85. His connections, his money, his power, they meant nothing on the rock. He was cut off from his empire, forced to work menial jobs like cleaning the latrines. His health, both mental and physical, began to deteriorate rapidly. The syphilis he had contracted as a young man, left untreated for years, began to ravage his brain. He became paranoid and confused, a shadow of his former self. After being released from prison in 1939 due to his failing health, Capone was a broken man. He spent his final years in seclusion at his mansion in Palm Island, Florida, his mind slowly eaten away by the disease. The once feared ruler of Chicago's underworld was now mentally a child, often rambling to himself and reliving past glories that only he could see. He passed away from a stroke and pneumonia in 1947 at the age of 48. Al Capone's story is more than just a gangster tale. It's a story about the American dream, twisted and corrupted. It's about the failure of Prohibition and the immense power of organized crime. Capone's reign was relatively short, less than a decade, but his legacy has echoed through a century of pop culture, immortalizing him as the ultimate American gangster. He was a product of his time, a brutal visionary who built an empire on booze and blood, only to be brought down by a simple ledger book. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into the dark side of history interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the annals of crime. We'll see you in the next one.